When you write lesson plans, you must document all the resources you use for planning and implementing your instruction. Most teacher candidates think in terms of textbooks, workbooks, works of literature, or videos when they think of sources, but very often teachers use unpublished resources, and even those should be documented. At Georgia Southern's College of Education, teacher candidates are required to document their sources in APA style. So in this video, we will focus on writing the list of references for your lesson plan, specifically citations of unpublished sources in APA style 7th edition. Here's an image of the third page of your lesson plan template. This is the page on which you list the materials and resources that you'll use for your lesson. You'll see that the template asks you to list your materials here and then your resources below. And first I want to clarify the difference between the two. A material is an item or a device that teachers and students use during a lesson, but these items or devices do not include intellectual property, so they don't need to be cited. Think of materials as pens, markers, paper, poster board, computers, projectors, magnets, microscopes, items like that. You don't have to cite those objects. On your lesson plan template, make a separate list of those materials that you and your students will use. A resource or a source is also something used during class, but the difference is that it includes intellectual property, so it must be cited. Intellectual property is a tangible or digital representation of someone's ideas or creativity. Intellectual property is the result of someone's brain work, and so it's not just a piece of paper, but it's the ideas and thoughts written on that sheet of paper or typed on that word processor or saved on that video. Examples of intellectual property would be works of literature, reports, music, works of art, slideshows, graphs, or images. In fact, this video that you're watching is also a work of intellectual property. Any work of intellectual property deserves documentation. On your lesson plan, you should write a separate list of all the resources you used for that lesson, all the works of intellectual property that contributed to your instruction and your students' learning. That list should be written in APA Style 7th edition. You can find guidelines on APA Style online at the website of the American Psychological Association or at Georgia Southern Library's LibGuides. The Georgia Southern Writing Center has APA guidebooks, and even our Folio eClassroom has links to those electronic guidelines. Please refer to those guidelines anytime you work on documenting the resources for your lesson plans. For university classes, most sets of guidelines emphasize the most commonly cited works for college-level writing: books, journal articles, magazine articles, research reports, anthologies, things like that. And you might refer to some of those works in your lesson plan, especially when you're using a textbook. So it's good to know how to cite those sources. At the same time, teachers use many resources that haven't been published in those traditional ways. Tests, slideshows, rubrics, handouts, graphic organizers, and other teacher-created resources must be documented correctly. If you ever use a resource that your clinical supervisor or that another teacher created but didn't publish, you still must document that source. If you ever use a resource that you created yourself, even if you didn't publish it, you must cite your own source. When you cite those sources, Follow the same order of information that you would with a traditionally published source. In APA style, the order of information is to note the author, then the date, then the title, and then the location. Here's an example. Let's say that I created a slideshow for my American literature class. The slideshow is about American naturalism, so I would cite it this way. I would note myself as the author first, with my last name placed before my first initial, Rimler, N. The next notation is the date. I created this slideshow in 2022, so I put the year in parentheses followed by a period. I titled my slideshow American Naturalism, Its Characteristics, and Its Authors. Notice how I have italicized the title. That's what APA style does for an unpublished document. Notice that I didn't capitalize every important word, just the first word. That's also a convention of APA style. So I've got the author, the date, and the title. Now, the location is a little more unusual because this resource is unpublished. In brackets, I need to explain that this document is unpublished, and I say what kind of document it is. Slides. This information helps readers to see that if they try to look up this resource online or in the library, they won't find it because it's unpublished. But then after the brackets, I add the actual location of this resource. It was created at a specific school in a specific town. It's advisable that you note the institution where your source was created as well as the town where the institution is. So your location might read this way with the high school and the city and state. Other examples of how to note the location might read like this. PowerPoint slides might be explained in brackets, followed by the university, and then the town where the university resides. If it's a rubric, indicate in brackets that you're citing an unpublished rubric, and then follow that with the name of the school and the town and the state. An infographic could be noted the same way with the unpublished infographic in brackets, followed by the name of the school, and then the name of the city and the state. All of those examples illustrate a source's location, the fact that it's an unpublished source and what it is, where it was created, and where it resides. It's possible that if you created a work electronically and uploaded it online, then that source might be accessible with a URL. If you created a source like that, you would still cite it by noting its author, date, title, and location. Here's an example. Let's say that I'm citing my syllabus. I would note myself as the author with my last name first. Then I would provide the date, 2022, in parentheses. The title of my document is SCED 4137 Syllabus Spring 22. And then I note that this is a Google document in brackets. That information indicates that this is an online document. I still indicate the city and state and the institution where I created this document. So I've got Georgia Southern University, Statesboro, Georgia. But then I have a retrieval date. I retrieved this on January 2nd of 2022. And then I noted the URL where one could access this document. This syllabus is not published in the traditional way, and it can be changed over time. And that's why I include the retrieval date. We only include the retrieval date and the URL if the resource is subject to change over time, which this syllabus might be. And so the retrieval date and the URL help to specify this citation. I am citing the citation as it existed on January 2nd at this specific URL. If I changed it and then someone else retrieved it, say next year, it might not be the same document, and so it would need a different retrieval date and a different URL. If the resource that you're citing will not be changed in the future, then you can omit the retrieval date and the URL. Now that we've discussed the conventions of documenting unpublished resources, let's take a look at a sample references list that includes digital resources and unpublished resources. First, let's examine the overall formatting of this page. The heading is centered at the top of the page, and it's only one word, references. Notice that the word begins with a capital letter, but that's all. It's not in all caps, it's not bold, it's not italicized, it's not underlined, it's not in a larger font or a different font. So keep in mind that you should not make this heading special in any way. Don't distinguish it in any way other than centering it at the top of the page. Notice that the citations on this list are double spaced. If a citation is more than one line long, the second and subsequent lines should be indented. That kind of indentation is called a hanging indent. The hanging indentations are APA's way of indicating when a new citation begins, because citations are not enumerated and they are not bulleted. Notice that while the citations themselves are double-spaced, there's no extra spacing between the citations, so don't include extra spaces between them. Let the hanging indentations do the jobs they're supposed to. And finally, the citations are listed in alphabetical order by the author's last name. If you ever need to cite a source that does not list an author, alphabetize that source by the work's title. And if you ever cite two or more sources by the same author, then list those sources in the order of the dates that they were published. In this references list, we have one book, one video, one unpublished rubric, and one digital slideshow that's subject to change over time. So let's take a look at each one. The first resource is a book, which you might already know how to cite. It's documented by the author, S. Christopher, with his last name first. We've indicated the date of publication, which is 2021 in parentheses. The title is listed next, and notice that we have italicized the title and only capitalized the first word and the word American, because American is a proper noun. And then the location is the publisher, Sea Winds Press. Usually the first thing students learn how to cite is a book, so that first citation might be just review for you. The second resource is a YouTube video. Many students list YouTube as the author, but that would be incorrect. Someone has to create the video before uploading it to YouTube, and that someone is the author. In this case, the author is someone named H. Fleetwood. So we list his last name first and his first initial after that. Next is the date. This video was produced in 2018. YouTube always offers a more specific production date. So when citing a YouTube video, we can also note the day and the month in addition to the year. So this YouTube video was produced on May 14th, 2018. Next, we have the title, which follows the same conventions for capitalization and italics. The first word is capitalized, as well as the word American, because it's a proper noun. All of the other words are in lowercase. And finally, we have the location. Because this is a digital resource, we indicate what it is, a video, in brackets. And then we indicate where it's uploaded, YouTube. After that, we provide a URL as the most specific location information. We know not only that the video is on YouTube, but we also know where on YouTube we can find it. Thirdly, we have an unpublished rubric. This is probably a document that the teacher created. The author is someone named S. Hancock. We again list the last name first. This person created the rubric in 2019, so the date is next in parentheses. The title follows the date, and it's simply Research Essay Rubric with only the first letter capitalized and the title italicized. The bracketed information explains that this document is unpublished, and its location is at the author's school in the city where that school is located. Finally, we have a slideshow that is saved on the Genially website. The author is someone named A. Lamb, listing the last name first. The date of this slideshow is 2020. The title is italicized and it includes proper nouns, so we capitalize the first letter of the title and all the proper nouns in the title. The bracketed information notes that this is a slideshow, but also that it is stored in the Genially cloud. Because this slideshow is digital and subject to change, we included the retrieval date in our citation, 12 December 2021, and then we also include the URL to help a reader find this exact slideshow. Now, here's an image of how that same references list would appear on the third page of the lesson plan template. Notice that the first section on this page simply lists the devices or the items, the materials that the teacher and students would use. That's a pretty short list. And then in that second section, we have the references list formatted appropriately according to the conventions of APA Style 7th edition. I realize that these details are intricate and tedious. To students new to APA style, they might not be logical either, and that's okay. You tend to understand the logic of these conventions after you get used to using them after a while. I don't expect you to memorize all of these procedures, but I do expect you to know how to find the resources and guidelines that you need to document your resources correctly. We're conducting this workshop not only because documentation is required on your lesson plans, but also because faculty's past observations of Georgia's Southern teacher candidates show us that those teacher candidates need reinforcement of their documentation skills. Remember that when it's time for you to be evaluated for your certification, your evaluators will expect you to document your sources correctly. But even more importantly, when you're a classroom teacher, you'll have to teach these skills, so it's important to learn them now. This example references list appears in our content module in our Folio eClassroom, so you can look at it more closely there. I've also provided a second set of examples in our eClassroom as well. With the APA guidelines, this video, and 2 sets of examples, you should have enough information to complete the assessment at the end of our documentation workshop. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.